What is your freedom worth to you? Each of our guests had a light bulb moment. They longed to live rather than merely exist. They smashed through their fears and programmed minds, trusting themselves, their faith, and their survival instincts, leaving the guilt, fear, oppression, and drudgery of their past for a brighter future. They took a brave and courageous step into freedom. This is their story of how they got a life. Welcome to Get a Life podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Get a Life podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. I am Cheryl. I am an ex-member of the Exclusive Brethren, or the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, from Maple Creek, Saskatchewan in Canada, and I left in 1992. And today I have with me Richard on the panel today. He is an ex-member of the Exclusive Brethren and the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church as well. And he is from Cambridge in the UK. And our very special guest today is Chris Jones, also from Forest Hill in London, UK, who now resides in South Africa. So welcome, Chris, and welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
I am super excited, Chris, to have you on here. You have quite the colorful story that we are all looking forward to hear. Many people will recognize your name on social media underneath comments on the Ex-Exclusive Brethren pages. So we are excited to be able to attach a story to your face. And so I'm going to just hand the mic right over to you if you want to introduce yourself and let us know how you became outside of the Exclusive Brethren, because you left way back when, and it was known as the Exclusive Brethren then. So take it away.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. Yes, I'm very happy to be on this podcast. It's I'm having to think back several decades to try and remember all the ins and outs and why I left the Brethren and how I left and all this. And actually, when I look at the really sad stories about how people have left and they've lost everything, I was totally unscathed, really. I'm so happy for that. I think I left when I was 16, back in 1970. And in a rather bizarre way, I actually profoundly thank my parents for teaching me what an awful religion they followed. My father came home from work on the train, gulped down a meal, and then rushed off to the meetings, and there was absolutely no family life whatsoever. My father was Charles Barber from London. I actually assumed the name Jones after leaving the Exclusive Brethren. I feel certainly no bitterness. I just feel very sad for people trapped inside. Well, how did all this happen? Well, I was born in London, UK, to an Exclusive Brethren family in 1953. I grew up in Forest Hill in southeast London and attended the City Hall in Park Street, London. I've got 3 siblings, 2 older sisters and a younger brother. I haven't seen them since 1970, although I have actually spoken to them since that time. Well, I followed my 2 older sisters into, funnily enough, a Church of England primary school in London. By the time I was 7, which would have been in 1960, I began to realize I was different from the other kids at school. I'd been selected to play one of the kings in the school nativity play. And my father wrote a letter to my teacher telling her that I was not allowed to act in this role. And I was so sad because I'm actually a sort of, I like to be the center of attention, and I loved acting even at 7. I also had an invitation to a school friend's birthday party. But again, my father wrote a letter for me to give to the boy, declining. And I was a 7-year-old. I often wonder what the letter said. Well, it was during all the upheavals in the early 1960s, 1960, actually, the year would have been 1960. And I was excused from religious instruction and from school assembly. And I wasn't allowed, at the end of the year, I wasn't allowed to participate in the school party and all that. And then, unsurprisingly, I was then withdrawn from the school and transferred to a non-secular school. And that would have been about 1961. I would have been about 8. As for the meetings in those days, I remember having to sit through Sunday meetings and occasionally on Saturday. When I was a little bit older, I can remember attending the 3-day meetings at Alexandra Palace in London with Big Jim Taylor, Central Hall, Westminster. In the famous 1959 meetings, I was probably there, but I was too young to remember anything. And I remember the 3-day meetings in Dorking in 1964 when Big Jim went missing for a day. I heard a lot of excited talk about them, but I was really too young to know what it was all about. Well, on a personal note, life was very boring. I had no friends I could play with. But I did look forward to family holidays. In those days, we were allowed to have them. We lived, of course, in London, in the south of England. We used to go to Margate in the south of England, where I used to chisel fossils out of the chalk cliffs. And this actually started some sort of obsession for rocks and fossils, which is still with me today. I've just retired as a lecturer in geology from a local university.
Wow.
At that time, I would have been about 9. I borrowed a book from the school library, and it's called The World We Live In. It is a Time Life book. It influenced me greatly. I used to go to the local museum to attend lectures on fossils and evolution, and at this point, I just made up my mind to be a geologist. I know that this didn't go down with the brethren, but I just kept quiet about it. I was now 12 and under immense pressure to ask to what do they call it? To communion.
Break bread.
Break bread. I had to ask to break bread. But there was just one problem about it. I'd never developed an interest or a belief in religion, especially my parents' one. I was told very strongly that my family would separate from me if I didn't ask for fellowship. I knew this only too well. There's a boy a little bit older than me in Bromley, just south of London, who ate all his meals in the kitchen. And I remember that strongly. Likewise, I actually had a cousin in St Albans. So the Eversheds are all cousins of mine, and this is one of my Evershed cousins. Yeah. And my mother is an Evershed, and he lived in St Albans. He never asked to break bread. He never asked for fellowship, I think was the phrase they use. And you know, like he was considerably older than me, but he had all his meals in the kitchen. Well, I was under all this pressure. I didn't know what to do. I asked my next door neighbour, who seemed to be quite a person I could talk to, and one of my school teachers for advice. And they both had the same thing to say. You know, basically, if taking a pinch of bread and drinking a sip of wine every Sunday morning keeps everybody happy, then go and do it. So I asked to break bread. I was 12. I think I cut it very short, a matter of days before they would have had separate tables, as they said. Now, I'd always been a very naughty boy. Even now, I'm not exactly a good a person. I'm still rather naughty at times. But apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently I'd been less naughty over the last few weeks. And my father saw that as the Lord was working with me. And he proposed me for fellowship. I just wonder what they said at the meeting when my name came up.
It's kind of a low standard, isn't it?
Yeah. At the time, in my naivety, I vowed. Now, I was 12. So, as I say, in my naivety as a 12-year-old, I vowed that when I leave school, I'm also going to get a job, move into a flat with a worldly friend, and leave the brethren behind me and live happily ever after. Well, little did I know what prescience I had at the time. I would do just that. I'm not sure about the happily ever after bit, though, but I did do exactly that. But events overtook me, as I will explain. Well, now I was breaking bread. I was a fully fledged saint. And you have to excuse me if I'm using expressions that were sort of in vogue in the 1960s, because I've really been out of touch since 1970. So if they're no longer used. But I learned how to chant the correct prayers at the correct time, give out the right hymn. I never took part in readings, though. I don't think I was really expected to. I was a teenager. In 1965, I was 12, going on for 13. And I remember Bruce Hales Sr. It's the only brush I've ever had with the Hales dynasty. This is Bruce Hales Sr. We went to see him at a brother's house in North London. I think it was Max Woodcock, the brother in question. Bruce Hales was apparently giving financial advice to some brothers, and he used to disappear into a room, and then he would go out and drinking the whiskey, of course. I remember that. We all had to, at that time, we all had to make money and put it in the collection, apparently for a new city room. Well, I actually made some money. I'm not really very business orientated, but I used to get these, we called them liver tins from the local butchery, and I used to paint them and sell them as waste paper baskets. And I did make some money, but I never put it in the collection. I spent it on my own things.
So you sold these, were you selling these to the brethren, these
waste
only to the brethren? That was handy for the ministry, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I think, honestly, I would cringe if I could see my handiwork today. But and I think the brethren were just, doing the thing and buying it from a committed young brother. Little did they know. Now, the next thing I knew was that the Haleses were apparently wrong. There was a spate of confessions and some really juicy ones, but I think I was too young to understand them. The brothers who'd been the top brass during this time were either being kicked out or sat at the back. I remember in London there was Cyril Byng. He became a Renton, and Eric Burr also became a Renton. And I remember they were very vociferous in this during these times. The system, I think they call it, is very vociferous. A commercial system, but then they all ate humble pie and they sat at the back, and well, meanwhile we were getting all new rules every week dictated by Big Jim Taylor in New York. No pets, no holidays, no working on Saturdays, we didn't actually have pets, but I'm a great animal lover. But in those days, I wasn't used to animals. But I remember my aunt having to get rid of her cat and budgerigar, and it was, it was a sad. I just thought it was fucking stupid, but excuse my French. Well, I found I was about 13, 14 by this time. I just found brethren life absolute drudgery. Absolute drudgery. You had to write off a Sunday. There's nothing you could do on a Sunday.
Yeah.
It's that, the new rule came in. They called it the essential occasion. The breaking of bread, that was now starting at 6 a.m. And the whole thing went through until 6 o'clock in the evening. I mean, 12 hours, just absolute drudgery and boring. I can't even tell you anything that was said there. But now, these days, you had to write off Saturdays as well. You had a Saturday morning meeting and the dreaded fellowship meetings. I used to start getting into a good book on a Saturday morning. Dragged off to a fellowship meeting. I really began to hate the whole bloody nonsense of the exclusive brethren. I remember at school on a Monday morning, we boys were chatting about our activities over the weekend, and one boy says, he went camping with his father and his cousin, and another boy said, no, we did all this. I go, what could I possibly just sat the whole weekend through the most endless hours of boring religious meetings, of which I had absolutely no interest or belief in at all. There are some things I can remember, though, some funny things. I can remember a local meeting in Sydenham in South London, and the scripture they were reading was about the sun standing still. And I just thought to myself, if you can believe that, you can believe anything. and the sun reversing on itself. And they were dead serious. It really happened. Then one brother at the end of the meeting, and I'll tell you his name. His name was Mr. Gill. He was a bus conductor, I believe. His hairstyle was a bit like a hedgehog. I remember that. He asked a question, and he said, "Well, it wasn't the sun that stopped. It was the Earth stopped rotating." And then Mr. Bing said, "No, we can't say that. The Bible didn't say that." And I just thought, my God, I can't believe this. Looking at from a 21st century perspective, I can now understand why some people get scammed by these Nigerian con artists.
Well, yeah.
If you can believe in a Nigerian princess is going to give you, well, that pales in comparison to believing the sun reversed.
So basically, they were going back about 500 years to the idea that the Earth is stationary and the sun goes round it, which I think, was it Galileo or Copernicus disproved? Galileo got excommunicated by the Catholic Church, didn't he, for stating that the sun was the centre of the solar system, not the Earth.
Yeah, and he had to recant, but then he said, he pointed to his telescope. He was pointing to Jupiter's moons, and he said, "But they still move." Another some very, very good advice, which I'd like to pass on to you, which I got from the preaching. Don't be a Sadducee. Yes. Because they'll make you sad, you see.
If only they practice what they preach.
Yeah. Anyway, I just found the whole thing so utterly boring, and I just decided, I just planned, I would leave school and I would leave the religion, I'd get a job and blah, 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 blah. And the first thing I was going to do when I leave this awful religion was to join the Boy Scouts. And that's exactly what I did. because I love the open. I became an exploration geologist, but I just love the outside and all these things. Oh God, all the funny things that everything that I was interested in was banned, or distinctly frowned upon. I am a great lover of classical music. I always have been. I don't really play any instrument very well, but I'm a great lover of classical music. I absolutely love it. Now, in my day, don't forget we're talking about 1960s. The reel-to-reel tape, magnetic tape recorder was permitted, but vinyl LP records were not. They didn't mind music coming from magnetic tape, but they objected it to coming from a plastic record. Now, this presented problems because I used to borrow the records. I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. My father bought it for me. It was all okay. But I borrowed the LPs from the library, local library. But then I had to go to a friend's house, to a school friend's house, to get the recording on my tape. You see,
right?
Of course. I mean that my friend's father just could not understand. Well, and not only that, I had to pretend that I was going to the swimming baths, because I couldn't obviously say that I was going to a school friend's house.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to take my swimming things with me, and then say, "Oh, I've got to go home now. Can I just put these in the sink and get them wet?" And they just could not. Understandably, they could not understand at all what it was all about.
So did you add a little bleach just to get the right chlorine smell?
I know I wasn't that didn't quite have that vision, but anyway, it was so bizarre. Another thing I used to do, but my father used to get the British Daily Telegraph every day. He was an insurance underwriter. It was before the days of brethren businesses and all that. He was a highly respected insurance underwriter in the City of London, and every evening he used to come home with the Daily Telegraph, which I used to read from cover to cover. I probably glossed over the sports pages because they didn't really mean very much to me as a EB. But on Friday, there was a special treat because it came with the colour supplement, the Weekend Telegraph magazine. And I was enthralled by this magazine, and I even went to see the editor. I was thinking, I want to become a journalist, a science journalist. And I went to their offices in Fleet Street in London, and I saw the editor, and I was in school uniform. They even took me to lunch, and they were quite happy to have a school. Of course, I was leading an absolute double life.
Yes.
But it was all exciting, to do these things. I miss it now.
Yeah.
But sometimes my father used to come home with the magazine with a page ripped out. And why did you rip the page out? Oh, some reason. So I thought, well, I have to get the magazine and find out what I was missing. So there was one of the things he'd ripped out was as an advert with I don't know what the advert was, but it showed a girl, which I suppose she was revealing a bit more than he would have liked. But what he didn't know was I'm gay. And it didn't really But anyway, that's another issue which I'm coming to. And another time, he didn't bring back the magazine, full stop. And this was a thing that I was actually following. I'm very, very interested in astronomy. And, well, I am a geologist, but planetary geology. And this was a 3-week serialization. And the third copy, he didn't bring home. He said, no, it was all very evil, and they were talking about God as just the Hebrew God and all that. So the first thing I do, go and get the magazine and read it. I mean, it's not just exclusive brethren. In South Africa, during apartheid times, there are many books which were banned, so I just made sure I read them.
Yeah.
Salman Rushdie's, what was the book that was banned here?
Satanic Verses. Yeah.
Satanic Verses. I was one of the first to read that. I had to read it because it was banned.
Yeah, there's no better way to make sure everyone reads something than to ban it, is there?
Ban it,
Yeah.
If I lived in Florida, I'd be the best read person in the whole state. Yeah. Oh, about this time, I'm talking about 1968. One of the local brothers was by the name of David Burgess, and he was kicked out. There's been a lot of stuff about it recently. I don't quite remember the reasons, but he was involved in the Stow Hill depot, something along the lines. But anyway, he was kicked out, and he wrote a 3-part serialization in a British tabloid, a Sunday tabloid, the Suicide Sect.
Yeah, I've read it. I've got a copy of that article.
I've recently read it as well, but I read it at the time. I had to go out and get the paper, and I read it, and then I thought, now this would be a good opportunity for me to call my very good friend. His name is John Anstey. He was the editor of the Daily Telegraph magazine. I want to write an article about this religion. My parents belong to it. And he said, well, they don't really do stuff like that. I was trying to sell my story. And anyway, it's a long story. I will talk about that later. But and then little things like anybody who watches this podcast who is my age will, from the south of England, will know the Park Street City Hall. And it was set back from the main road, and there was a long passage going to the hall from the road. And I remember I was about 14, 15. I remember standing at the entrance of this passage and watching all the brethren go out and onto the street. And it was just after this headscarf rule with all the sisters with their hair flowing down to their... And I thought, it's just a religion. It's nothing more. It's nothing less. It's a religion, and a rather stupid one at that. And I used to remember being forced to help out with the microphones after a Saturday meeting at Park Street. I was furious. Now, I had a lot of personal problems. I had actually behavioural problems. I used to mess around at school, at home. I had nowhere to let off steam.
Yeah.
I used to look out of the window at fellow friends, school friends of mine playing. I wasn't allowed to join them. I was locked up in my bedroom for being naughty day in and day out. I am telling you, I was a living hell for a 14-year-old. And I'd just come out as gay at school. It wasn't probably the best thing to do at the time, but, and it didn't really help me. But no. I had all these things. So I just planned to leave school after, in Britain, what we call the O-levels. I don't know if they still have this system. So it was a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to stay on and do A-levels. I just wanted to leave home, get a job, and fuck off. That's what I wanted to do. That, by pure chance, was June 1970.
Oh.
I left school in June 1970. I applied for a lot of local boring jobs. I just wanted to go and study and get my university entrance requirements part-time. And lo and behold, we have Aberdeen incident. Everything was handed to me on a plate. It was simple. It was just so absolutely simple. And I will never forget it. It was Tuesday, the 28th of July, 1970. I was 16. I had just finished school and I was just about to get my first job. And there were all these rumors, hush, hush, all these rumors about, did you hear Big Jim he went mad at the 3-day meetings, or he was caught in bed with some woman and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, this is juicy. Let's see what happened. So one meeting that I actually really wanted to go to, probably the only one, was the city reading at Park Street on Wednesday, the 29th of July, 1970. And I had my little moped. My father had bought me this thing, I think just to try and mollify me, some way. But anyway, I went to Park Street on this thing. And before the meeting starts, Mr. Eric Burr, he grabs a microphone and he proceeds to tell everybody his story of the alleged events at Aberdeen. And they tried to silence him. They switched off the microphone system. But I had sat on my own in the balcony. And there was no one with me. This is the best. We don't need any entertainment. Not with this.
This was the first time it was actually interesting.
Yes. Oh my God! I just wish that it would have been possible to video it at the time. But then a whole bunch of them walked out. David Davis led the people to walk out, and about, I don't know, half the meeting, maybe a third of the meeting, they walked. I can't really tell you how many, but a good chunk, less than half, but a good chunk of the brethren walked out. And some of them dilly-dallied, and they went back in again, sadly, for themselves, because they I'm not going to give names here, but they walked back in and they had a lot of problems, But anyway, that was the last meeting I ever went to. And I on the way home, I stopped at some friends of mine. They were actually former brethren they'd been withdrawn from earlier that year, but they were good friends of mine. I went and I told them exactly what happened. They were intrigued, and that was that. Now I stayed with the Aberdeen people just for a couple of weeks or so until all the hoo-ha died down, until the dust had settled. But then, and I'd started a new job, but then Eric Burr said he tried to control my life, and I told him to fuck off. I think I was the only brother that actually physically said it. And that was it. And that was it. I just did my own thing. And I shortly did move into a flat with some friends, and I'm not quite sure if I could say I lived happily ever after, but what I did do is I began to surf a wave And I still believe 54 years later, I'm still surfing that wave.
Yeah.
I know life hasn't been a bed of roses. I've made my share of mistakes. But if I'm ever feeling a bit sorry for myself or a bit down and out, so not that I ever get depressed, but if I think, oh, bugger it, I just think to myself, oh my God, just imagine what, I just got out.
Just thankful for what you escaped from. Yeah. And escaping at a young enough age to have a decent life left.
Well, my new life had started. I mean, I to this day, I celebrate the 29th of July as my Independence Day.
Oh, I love it.
I've got three days I celebrate in a year. There's my birthday in November. There's the 29th of July, which is Independence Day. And my cat's birthday, he's 16, Mongoy, which I now know to be the 18th of December. But I was previously celebrating it in August.
So is this you at 16?
No, this is me at 22.
Oh, okay.
I'm coming to this bit. I was a student, but I'll come on to that bit. I left when I was 16, and I'm now 22. Yeah. No, I discarded everything. I discarded my surname. My father, as I said, was Charles Barber. I kept the Charles bit, but I discarded the Barber bit. And then, of course, I had such a laugh after I left. I had a lot of friend, nothing to do with the Brethren at all, and I just never looked back on the Brethren. It's only with the advent of social media, I've actually ever thought about the Brethren. I used to have some laugh. There was an elderly brother I don't think I perhaps better give his name, but long deceased now, but an elderly brother in the north of London. And I called him, and I faked an Australian accent. I think I would cringe if I could hear that now, because I'm no good at doing accents. And I phoned him as Joe Bloggs or whatever, made up some name from Australia. And I said, I remember you. And then we had a conversation. Oh, yes, the 3-day meetings, JT. Boston, 1951. That's 2 years before I was born. I said, yes. And and I used to regularly phone this elderly brother up. It was so funny, and I really used to laugh. And then I called him one Sunday morning, very, very early, at about. Before they went to the supper, it was about 4:30 in the morning. I called him and I pretended I was calling from Sydney. And I said, no, we've had the rapture this morning and I've been left behind and I just have to be, and it was such a laugh.
That's funny. I thought you were going to say you were calling from heaven and you couldn't see him anywhere.
I think he would have probably believed that. Okay, I had a job. I worked for a petrol station. I worked for an insurance company, like father, like son, I suppose. I became a claims clerk at an insurance company in the city. But my lifestyle, I had to do another job. I also worked in a petrol station, and eventually I also worked in a gay bar in Vauxhall in South London. I still managed to study though. I managed to get my A-levels part-time. Nothing fantastic, but it allowed me to do what I wanted to do. Very hard work, but I was free. Absolutely no regrets. And then I decided I'm going for a trip around the world, make up for all these things. And I went to Belgium. I went on North Sea ferries from Hull. I actually went to Hull to see I wanted to get to Hull University. So they said, and we chatted, it was just an informal chat with one of the professors there. And then from Hull, I got the North Sea ferry to Zeebrugge in Belgium. And I thought, it's my trip around the world. This is my first stop. So I got off the ferry, 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, where to? I can't remember now if I walked or if I got the bus, but it was along the seafront, not very far from Ostend and Dunkirk, that sort of area. And it was about 11 o'clock. And since I'm here, there's a bar. Since I'm here, let me go and have a drink. So I went into this bar. I said to the bar, I was the only one there. It was about midday. I went into the bar and I said to the barman, I tried to speak French. I'm absolutely useless at languages. I'm really sorry, I'm useless at languages. But I tried my best. I spoke French to the barman and asked him if he'd got a job, avez-vous du travail, or what he said. And have you got any employment here? And the barman looked at me, and then he laughed at me, and he said to me in impeccable English, he says, first of all, he says, your French is useless. Don't bother with it. Sort of deflated me a bit. And then he said, secondly, we don't actually use French here. We use Walloon, it's our local language. But he says, yes, we are looking for someone as a sort of general not handyman, but a general help, a driver, a cleaner sort of thing. But you have to come back when the boss is here, because you see what he says. But he'll be back in about half an hour. But no, about an hour. Just come back at 1 o'clock. So I said, okay. So I thought, well, let me take a walk down the beach and kill some time. But as I was going out, they said, no, the boss is here, and they offered me a job, and I worked there in the bar. By pure coincidence, and it really was coincidence, so it wasn't planned at all. It happened to be a very gay-friendly bar, and I got on well. And I met this guy in the bar a few weeks later, who was a land surveyor. And I don't know how he'd got this thing, but he'd got a contract in South Sudan, what is now South Sudan, getting soil samples. And I'd got a sort of business background, and I'd also done an A-level in geology. And I thought, well, no, I can. And he offered me the job, so I went to South Sudan. But it's just a brief thing. I then went to South Africa, where I got permanent residence, but I didn't stay there. I went back to Hull University. I did my degree in geology. Well, I wrote a letter to my father saying, look, I'm now doing this. No reply at all. I had some adventures in South Sudan. I went to Ethiopia, got kicked out of Ethiopia because there was a communist revolution. This had been 1974. I had to flee to Kenya. But it was all, I loved adventure. That's what I missed in the exclusive. Better than sitting through a fucking boring fellowship meeting. Well, I went to Hull University. Unsurprisingly, nobody believed my story. I just kept quiet. I think I was going to get a reputation for making things up. Just a few tears. I think the only time when I graduated, fellow students were there with their parents, and I just realised where I'm coming from. Short-lived, but well, the ink wasn't even dry on my degree certificate, and I went to Zimbabwe as a school teacher.
Wow.
3-year contract in Zimbabwe. Immediately after independence, and Mugabe was a good boy in those days. There was a lot of goodwill. I then went to Kenya for a year as a science teacher. And then I started my career as a geologist. I started as a very junior geologist in Botswana in gold exploration. And then I moved to South Africa in 1988. I became a citizen, platinum and chrome exploration. I've made it my home. 1997, I decided to father a child. We're very close. His mum is a Zimbabwean, but there's nothing messy about any divorce or anything like that. So we're all very good friends. My son lived with me. He's now 27. He's a IT guy. I was a consulting geologist until 2011, when I joined the staff at the University of Limpopo as a lecturer in geology, and I retired. I was forced to retire as acting head of department in 2022, a couple of years ago. Now I'm a voluntary maths teacher at a rural school and writing textbooks for a living. So I am really enjoying things. Well, I've got two close relatives. I have both my mother was the eldest in her family, and I have an uncle. He actually passed away last year, but his name is Brian Evershed. He was never in. He never broke bread, and he moved to Switzerland. He worked for CERN, or most of his working life. He was an electrical engineer. He was a very good uncle to me. He treated me really almost like his own son. But he was very good. We had our disagreements. We had some serious disagreements, but they were all very avuncular. You know, it was nothing bad. And I was very happy. I used to spend, when I was a student, I used to spend my summer holidays with him just outside Geneva. Of course, I'm talking about the days well before email. We used to write to each other, the so-called snail mail. And I also have an aunt who I'm in touch with. She's 86 now, who lives in the south of England. And, you know, she left at Aberdeen, and we've always been in touch. Her husband passed away a few years ago, but we've always been in touch. And even my son, when he goes to the UK, he goes round and sees her. It's the only relative, really. But anyway, unknown to me, I don't know whether to thank them or to attack them for this, but they were leaking some of my letters to my parents. They thought that this was a good thing because I was telling them about my life and what I was doing and blah, 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 blah. And then I had a boy, a son who was born in 97. And I said to my aunt, so I said, I wonder if I pick up my son now, he's a baby. And I suppose my parents would have picked me up at that age, but they hate me, you know. So my aunt actually wrote to her sister, my mother, and said, no, this is what your son thinks of you. You know, you call yourself Christians. Do you want your son to think that you hate him? And I didn't know that she'd done that. And I got a letter out of the blue from my father. It was if I can call it a letter, and if I can call him my father, biologically, yes, I suppose. A sperm donor, I think would be a better term. But I got a letter, it was a 2-liner. And it just said that the suggestion has come to us that we hate you, how wrong that is, and blah, 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 blah. And to give him credit, he wanted forgiveness. And so I actually called him, and it was before the days of WhatsApp. It was an expensive phone call from South Africa to London. And we had a chat. And he wanted to give me some money and all that, because my father was he was a child abuser. I had to say that. I don't mean in a sexual way, but certainly to lock a kid up. Yes, he was a pretty nasty man, to me anyway, and he was physically violent. He used to beat me and kick me and all sorts of things, and I don't even know what my crime was. And he obviously realized this, and he was, I think, genuinely sorry that he'd done all these things, and he wanted me to forgive him. Well, I don't harbour grudges. I said, oh, fine, I'll come and visit you then. And then in the same breath, he says, no, I don't want to see you in my life. I don't want you anywhere near my house, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm afraid
Wow.
I just told him to go and fuck himself. What can you do? So that was a funny thing. A bit later on, this is about 2001, 2002. I had a letter from my sister, the elder of my 2 sisters. My sister, in inverted commas. It was they had this system of there was a name for it, that they trying to get people to come back. What did they call that? There was a word that they used.
The review.
The review. That's it. The review. It was part of this review, a wrong judgment or whatever they called it, well, I chatted with her, but she's just full of a load of nonsense, but just chanting slogans, actually. Brethren speak, as I call it. So that happened. My father died in 2007. At least they informed me, for what it was worth, although I never contacted them after that. My mother died in 2016. Again, I was informed, and surprisingly, I even received a small inheritance.
Wow.
Were you invited to the funeral? Like, were you allowed to go? Did they ask you if you wanted to go to the funeral?
I never followed it. I knew she was ill, but she was nothing to me. I would like to say that publicly. I don't love my parents. They're absolutely nothing to me.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't have gone even if they'd invited me. I didn't even answer their correspondence, but I'm aware that they passed away. I never really thought anything about the brethren at all. It never crossed my mind. Months, years, I never thought anything about it. I was busy with my own thing. I never had any emotional ties to it. I was glad to be out of it all until the early 2000s, and I stumbled across Dick Wyman's site. And then I thought, oh my God, no, I didn't realize that people had such anguish, in leaving the brethren. I just didn't realize. I'd no idea that people suffered so much. And I think I'd just like to, sorry, I've been rambling on, but I'd just like to say, if there are any young brethren watching this podcast, my advice to you from the bottom of my heart, get out now before you're trapped. And I think that really sums my life. I have no grudges against them. I have no bitterness. I have no sorrows. In fact, if I want to live my life again, it's the only thing I know. You know, I profoundly thank my parents for. I think I stood on. I was able to stand on my own 2 feet, probably a lot earlier than I should have done, but I was able to do it. And I had such behavioural problems when I was a kid, but they just evaporated in 1970 when I left the religion. And well, that's basically my story. Yes, okay. Cheryl, those pictures, that the one that you showed just now.
Hang on, I'll bring the pictures up.
Yeah, and I'd just like to show you.
Let me go to the very beginning. Let me go to the first one.
Okay. Oh, that's me as a little boy. This would have been about 1958. Funnily enough, I can actually remember that picture being taken. I can actually remember it. I can remember the camera.
Wow.
A brownie box camera.
Wow.
That was when I was a student. That was in 1977. So I'd already been out 7 years by the time.
That's a classic, isn't it? With the flared jeans and the kind of the Beatles hairstyle.
Yeah, it's well, we all dressed like that at the time.
Yes.
It looks bizarre now. I showed it to my son, and he said, "Well, he can tell it's me, but you'd have to really know me to."
Yeah.
Yeah. This is much. This is much more recent. This is 2016. I was on a gay pride here in Mokopane in South Africa. So I'm with a few local friends, and we're just chilling for the day. The gay pride is always in May, and it's, of course, May is the middle of our winter, so it's a bit chilly. Okay, this is the culmination of my career. This is I'm a lecturer at the University of Limpopo. You can pick me out there. I'm with a bunch of my research students on what we call the Limpopo Mobile Belt, which is in the far north of South Africa, not far from the border with Zimbabwe. I don't know what year it was. We planned this is the same trip. Every September we plan a trip there with the research. Actually, this is the third years. This is not research group. This is the third years.
So this looks like some very intricately folded rock formations you're standing on.
Absolutely, yes. It's called the Sand River Gneiss. It's well, I won't go into a long geology lecture now, but it's highly contorted with two cratons or continental masses collided with each other about 2,500 million years ago.
Wow.
Called the Limpopo orogeny. Basically it's the Zimbabwe craton and the Kapval craton, which is in South Africa, and they collided, and you get this mashed up
Richard and I would stay for an hour lecture on this. Not sure all the listeners want to hear it, but we would.
Yeah.
You understand this was all actually created 6,000 years ago, Chris, I assume.
Well, I think probably the majority of the saints would probably believe that, but then they also believe in talking snakes and the reversal of the rotation of the earth and all sorts of other funny things.
They believe in Bruce Hales, which is even more bizarre.
I want to go back to something that you had said about your behavioral problems that you were having in there and how they went away when you left. And this is an issue that we're coming up against quite heavily right now inside the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is the word that they've used for many, many, many years is you're mental, right? You're mental. And for those that have reached out to us with this issue that are still inside there, and for those that are still struggling with this label in there, that I hope you can take solace in what Chris has explained, that behavioral problems, or what they call mental, is the result of you being placed in a confined situation, being placed inside a church that has so many rules and regulations that it causes your nervous system to literally need to expel out what's being held within it. So I hope that you can just sit back when you listen to Chris's story about how all his behavioral issues left when he left the Plymouth, when he left Exclusive Brethren, because it's not a you issue. This is an issue of your environment. When we are placed in an environment that is counterproductive to what we feel, you can't be placed in, you can't put a square peg in a round hole. And that's what happens when you try and fit yourself into something that you're not meant to fit into. So it has just been, it is something that's very, very heavily worded right now. They're just rampant with the word "you're mental" inside there right now, because there is so much upheaval, and because there are so many people starting to see through this, that this isn't a you issue. I want to point out the difference, though, between what you're being raised in. I had a conversation with someone just this morning on this. Is therapy is different than the box that they're using inside the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church as being labeled mental. Those are two different isolated situations. Therapy helps you unbrainwash your brain. It helps you take apart the process that you've been born and raised in so that you can see this freedom that you're allowed to have. What the brethren have called mental and applied therapy, or therapist too, is different. The therapy that you're going to encounter when you leave the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is different than the situation between being called mental and going to some of their therapists. Completely two different things. And I want you to make sure that you understand that when we suggest therapy for you as soon as you leave, or if we suggest therapy to you to help you get to leave, that is different than what the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church priests are calling you as mental. Two different things.
Yeah, Cheryl, I would add to that. I mean, I suppose I've always been wanted to be the actor and the center of attention and all this, and of course, not being able to participate in school plays was. I was very upset, you know, because I enjoy acting. I'm not particularly talented, but I enjoy it, and I suppose that's what it's all about.
It's an outlet for you, yeah.
Yes, and I love that sort of thing. But I wasn't allowed to be part of a school play. But the drama teacher at school, he really liked me. He says, "No, you can do this role. You know, you can play Hamlet or whatever." But of course, I couldn't. There's so many things I couldn't do. I used to argue with my father the whole time. I made his life hell. I didn't do it to make his life hell. He made his own life hell by being a member of the Exclusive Brethren.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't do it out of spite. But I was just, everything was confrontational, everything. And when I was at school, in English literature O-level, I don't know how I was allowed to do that because I think English literature was banned. But anyway, I did it. And we did, on one of the plays that we did was a Shakespeare play, it was Twelfth Night. So what used to be the Inner London Education Authority put on a play, Twelfth Night, especially for us school kids at a theatre. So I went to it, and I openly went to it, and I said, I'm going to it. It's up to you. If you want to make a big thing about it, do it. But I'm still going to this thing. And I did, and nothing ever happened. Nobody said anything. I made up the most obscene poems, but I certainly can't read them out on this podcast, about members of the Brethren, which I couldn't possibly, and I openly gave it to big shots in the religion, and they thought it was funny. And it was all about so and so being a rapist, and I'm sure you've heard about our club, the club with 7 members. Of all the fire of flaming hell, we are the glowing embers. We have conditions of above, and I won't say the rest of it. It gets a bit crude, but unabridged things. I wrote all these things, but then I just got shoved in a corner with this and this and this. I used to open my father's ministry books and just write "fuck off" and close it and put it back in the. I used to write far more obscene things than that, but it's not something. My own son would never ever dream of doing something like that to me. But then I don't lock him in his bedroom.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
that's the difference. Yeah,
I don't shove nonsense down his throat.
In the Brethren, they talk quite openly about your will being broken, and they're going to break your will, and they mean it in just the same sense as a wild horse is broken. And that's what they quite openly try and do. And I mean, either you break or you fight back, and you fought back.
Well, you see that there's another thing I forgot to mention. I guess this was in late 60s. I would have been about 14, 15. I used to go to the cinema at least twice a week. I used to watch all the new films that came out. I remember the Graduate, Dustin Hoffman, and that came out in 1969. I went to one of the first. I went to local cinema to see it. Then other films, all the Carry On films, I used to see those. And I used to go to or see all the films. I just tried to live a normal life, but it was such a pretense. It was really so stupid. But I tried my best to just be a normal person. But then you see, I like to be the center of attention, and I did the most stupid things, which after I left the Brethren, there was just no need to do such things. I don't wish to be crude or anything, but we had a teacher called Miss Daz, D-A-Z. Now, at that time, Daz was a brand name of a dishwashing liquid. So one of the boys said to me, well, why don't you call her 10% soap or something like that? So I did. I didn't. A big laugh for the class and all that, and I get into trouble naturally. One of the boys, this is a boys' school. He said, say, ask the French teacher, and she was French. And I actually, since quite recently, I've become friends with her. She was. It's a long story, anyway. But ask the French teacher, ma'am, what is French for sanitary towels? And I asked her this question. It was really so stupid, pathetic, but I just got a kick out of it because, what else is going to make me laugh? We used to have, this was amongst the brethren, we used to have this thing in London in the meeting called the Plymouth Gambling Association, or the PGA. And we used to bet on who was going to give the word in the ministry meeting on a Tuesday. So that was the one meeting I wanted to go to because we're laying bets on. And you used to bet. This was totally a brethren thing. In those days, it was before decimalisation of the currency. So it was like sixpence or a shilling. And then I remember getting all three right once. So pleased. And people were
The jackpot.
We're going to be giving Bruce Hales and his sons new ideas here.
It's too predictable these days. It's the same people every time.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, though, that the people, the young brethren who were all part of this funny story, we've all gone our separate ways. There's those like myself who had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Those have gone into Rentons, and those who are still with the Taylor, whatever it's called, the PVCC. Yeah. So, but no, it's in a bizarre way. I don't regret. I don't know how I can really say this, but I don't regret where I come from. I used to keep quiet about it because I didn't think anyone would believe me.
Yeah.
But now it's easy because you can just refer them to the media and social media, and it's so easy to see.
Yeah. I want to go back to July 29th, 1970.
Yes.
I want to sit, now that I know that you did poetry and you've got words to articulate this. Can we go back to that moment in time? Can you articulate a little bit more in depth what that was like sitting there when everybody started getting up and walking out? We've never really had somebody on here get in and really articulate the air of the room and like what that was like for everybody. What was that like for you as a 16-year-old?
Well, okay. The Park Street meeting room was, there was a platform, and then there was the main body of the hall, and then there was the galleries on three walls facing the platform. Now, in a weekday meeting, nobody sat in the gallery unless you came in late, and then you might sit in the gallery. But I used to sit in the gallery on my own, completely on my own. I used to bring a book with me, and I used to read. Nobody could see, and I used to read. I even used to listen to the radio. I had a transistor radio, and it was all a big kick for me to get away with this. But then, so I was on my own, and I knew, everybody knew that something was going to happen. So I had a bird's eye view of everything. If only we had the cell phones in those days.
Yeah.
So, I sat there, and the first thing that happened was Eric Burr, who was quite a big shot, but I would hardly really call him a Taylorite. He was certainly very vociferous, but wasn't quite. It didn't. It's not tarred with the same brush as the Big Jim people. Sorry if I call these Big Jim, because that's when I left. I can't know Simonton and Hales and all this. So I didn't particularly like him, but anyway, he stood up. Well, I don't know if he stood up or sat down, but he got a mic, and then he began to tell us what transpired at Aberdeen, or what he alleged. What he alleged that transpired at Aberdeen. That's probably the right way of putting it. He told us about the indiscretion and the fact that he was found in bed with Madeleine Kerr. He told us that he was speaking some nonsense in the meetings, and he was drunk. And the brethren didn't like this, and I can't remember if they told him to stop speaking, but they certainly turned the sound system off. So he was shouting this, but I could hear him quite well. I was in the gallery. And he was carrying on, and he was saying all these things. And some of the brethren, some of the big shots there, the big Taylor fans, they were having none of this. And led by David Davis, who I've since met, but that's another story. Led by David Davis, they just said, no, we're withdrawing from iniquity, and they walked out.
Wow.
So it was the Taylorites who walked out, and
yes,
right,
yes.
Okay,
yes, absolutely. And funnily enough, my parents stayed in. I would have thought that they would have walked out, but they walked out, and then after a while, David Davis and a few others walked back into the room to try and get the leading brother, who was AJG, Mr. Gardner, Alfred Gardner. They tried to get him to go out with them, but he really didn't know what was going on. He really didn't know what was going on.
And how was the talking going? Were they yelling? Were they shouting? Was it like, how was this conversations? Like, how escalated were the conversations?
I don't recall anybody really shouting.
Okay.
Apart from Eric Burr, but he was shouting to be heard.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't recall. There must have been. I'm trying to remember back 54 years.
Yeah.
There must have been some shouting. There must have been. You don't just get up and walk out of a meeting and withdrawing from iniquity and all that without some shouting.
And did some of those people that got up and walked out, was it wives and children too, or was it just the men?
I don't.
Or do you remember?
I don't recall. There were some of my brethren of my age who walked out independently. But the people who did walk out were the very people that you would think would side with Big Jim on this thing. And then I don't know what happened after that. They must have had some care meeting, and I think that the Big Jim people just withdrew from everybody who had opposed Big Jim. And although I didn't say anything, I just didn't go to any more of their meetings. I was obviously one of them. I was quite happy. The funny thing was, I stayed on the other side with the Aberdeen people. It's just a matter of days, and then I walked out on them. But But there was a big issue. No, we were going to withdraw from you, and you're shut up, and all that. But I'd already gone.
Wow.
So everyone withdrew from everyone else.
Yes. That was really what happened. Then I was totally out of the EBs. I have no idea what happens there.
Yep.
And
you took your chance. You took the door that was wide open for you. And the reason why I was asking you is there's a lot of people in there that are waiting for a moment like this to happen again in there, right? Like there's many people who that have that 1 foot in, 1 foot out, waiting for some door to fly right open that gives them that same door that you took, right? Where it was just like, you didn't really care what was happening, but this was your easy way out of just walking out this door and nobody would question you, right?
Yeah, because I had plans to leave, but I planned it because I need to get a job and I need to find a place to live and all that. But then everything was just handed to me on a plate. It was just so simple. There was
kind of like the ATO raids that are happening right now. And so, I mean, to those people inside who are looking for that door, it might come, it might not come. But you definitely have an opportunity to walk out with what's going on right now. You know, I'm not sure when this is going to air. It'll probably be a few weeks from when we've recorded this, but you know, as it is right now on April 13th, we're recording this, is the ATO raid is still happening. And I mean, for those of you that are telling yourselves that, you know, this is a regular normal audit, this is not a regular normal audit. I mean, we're how many days into this or how many weeks into this? This doesn't even sound like a normal raid happening at this point. And people are questioning that. Like, I've got people questioning me like, what do you know about raids? Is this even a normal raid? And I mean, if I was to sit back and look at it, to me, it doesn't even look like a normal raid. So, you know, I mean, I always just tell people, please get a hold of Olive Leaf Network if you need help. It is set up in New Zealand and Australia, two of the biggest places that have the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church going. I mean, I know the UK is not set up as that, but you can still reach out to Olive Leaf Network. There's tons of people to help you. That's why we keep on doing these podcasts. It's why I had Neville McCallum come on to be able to tell the history. It's why I wanted you on, Chris. When I heard that you were 16 years old, sitting in that gallery, watching this go down, I was like, you need to come on and tell your story. Because our generation, we don't know this. Like, we don't know this history. And for those people who have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and when they can hear you tell your story on what it was like and how it went down, it's important. It's inspiring. It's very inspiring to those people, especially the younger generation that are sitting there of like, hey, is this my door to leave? In my personal opinion, yes, it is your door to leave. And just make sure that, you've got the support on the outside here. Therapy is super important, guys. Therapy is super, super important. Even how when I left, when Richard left, when Chris left, what you're leaving is different than how we left. And therapy is even that much more important. I still went to a regular school. So I was still able to see that. A lot of people that are in there, they never had regular schools. Like, you're stuck inside an OSG, inside a Plymouth Brethren Christian Church school, which makes that brainwashing just a little bit more deeper. So make sure that you guys are reaching out for support. You are really understanding the truth of the matters that are going down right now. Don't listen to the priests in there. They're trying to cover this up. They're trying to throw this underneath the carpet. Read the newspapers. Michael Bachelard is very factual. His articles are exactly what's going on down there. And no, nobody was paid to take the picture of Bruce Hales. That was literally done by a disgruntled member, and nobody was paid. There was no money exchanged for it. I just want to make that clear.
So if you're looking to make a fast buck, that's not the way to do it. We're quite happy to receive any pictures you may send, but all you're going to get is our thanks.
Yes. There's no money exchanging happening on these podcasts or people that bring us stuff. So, yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say one thing. If you are advertising, let's say a supermarket chain, something like that, and you're advertising, and you've done your training in advertising, and you come up with some slogan, and you must buy this product, and you would know how to do it. But the exclusive brethren have gone one step further. They've got a captive audience who have to buy, and they say, if you don't buy from us, you'll go to hell. They might not say use those words, but that's what they infer.
Yeah.
And the worst thing about it, and I think that really, if there's anything evil about this, it is brainwashing children.
Yes.
There is nothing good about the exclusive brethren schools. Nothing good at all. I think they'd be better off being illiterate.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. You are depriving them of the ability to think for themselves. And that is evil. And I sincerely hope that the Charity Commission in the various countries in which they operate are aware of this.
Yeah.
Because that is seriously wrong to indoctrinate a child, and to the extent that they can't even look after themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's the worst thing. I could probably forgive them for some of the things that they do, but not that. That is evil.
Yeah. And it's also indoctrinated them to be so hateful towards ex-members. It's indoctrinated them to have this, and it gets handed down. That hatred gets handed down from the parents to the children. And then you end up with, things like what Ben Woodbury's gone through, like death threats that now are being thoroughly investigated. And I feel bad for the children. I would welcome my door open to my nieces and nephews any day. Any day. My siblings, probably not so much. I'd probably sit down and have a conversation, but I probably wouldn't let them stay here. My nieces and nephews, welcome in my home any day, because they are a product of it, right? My brothers and sisters are adults now. My heart goes out. And not that, they're all victims of the system. They are all victims of the system. But when you get to a certain age and you've got as much information that is out there, right? Like, use your God-given brain to realize, like, this is what's out there is so blatantly, statistically, a cult, a destructive cult, right? There's cults. There's cults everywhere in this world now, but then there's destructive cults. The Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is a destructive cult. And it's a destructive cult if you go back and watch 100 and however many podcasts we're at right now. April 13th, it's 106 podcasts. By the time this airs, it's probably 3 or 4 more. But, right, we see the destruction that happens mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, with how these people try and leave, how these people can't leave, how they've kept them so in their cage and making them believe that they have the key to leave, but they don't have the key to leave. Yeah.
I think the difference is between children and adults in there is that the children have no way of knowing any different other than what they're told. Now, the adults are brainwashed, but there is also, because they're adults, there's also what they call willful blindness, which means that they're deciding, electing not to see, not to read, not to believe the truth of what's going on, and that they are responsible. Diminished responsibility maybe, but they are responsible.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that those of my age, older than me, will know the days of the system very well.
Yeah.
But they were presumably they thought it was all wrong and evil at the time. Well, why is it okay now?
Yes. They've renamed it. They now call it the ecosystem.
Oh yes,
They
I've seen
revive the
that.
system and they call it the ecosystem. Makes it just a little bit greener, you know.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. No, all I would say is that about the PBCC. Just to summarize, I got away from it. I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't have any baggage about that, but I just feel desperately sorry for those people who are trapped inside.
Yeah.
And if you are trapped inside, it's not good for you to think about it. You know, you must think that no, this is the best place for me to be. This is God's choice for me, and all that. Because if you don't and you question it, it's going to make your life very confusing, because you know you can't leave it. You're not going to leave your partner, your house, your business, your grandchildren, your kids, blah blah blah. You're going to lose everything, and you're not going to do it. So you're better off just, you know, if you can't beat them, join them, sort of thing.
Yes.
Just live with it. You're not going anywhere. I think. Look, I'm only speculating. I have no idea, but I would imagine there must be many people trapped in there who the last thing they want on this planet is to be going to meetings and be part of this nonsense. But they're not going anywhere, and they know it.
Yeah.
They're going to die in religion.
Yeah. My advice is just live your life. Start going to the cinema. Start going camping. Start taking holidays. Live your life as you want to live it. And to me, that is the best way to carve out this door that is flashing. Let's get out.
Because I sometimes think to myself, you know, the thought comes to me, a Sunday morning, just a normal Sunday morning. I'm doing what I do on a Sunday morning, and I think, my goodness, just imagine if this was 54 years ago. What would I be doing now? And then I look at the time difference in England. What would they be doing now? And you know, and I just feel so thankful that I'm not having to do that. And you know,
okay, well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. I just want to remind everybody, with all the chaos that is going on inside there, right, to please remember to reach out. I'm going to reiterate it again. Reach out to Olive Leaf Network. Here are their emails. It's set up in New Zealand and Australia. There's ways to move through what's happening inside there. So please reach out for support. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today. And until next time, everyone, much love to you all. Take care, everyone. How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe. If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.